Philip, thank you for joining us.
Hello, nice to be here.
First of all, marketing BBC. Before you arrived here, you headed up Diageo and a bit of Burger King too. How did those facilitate and teach you and prepare you for life at the BBC?
Well, I think that obviously the two companies are very different in terms of what they offer, but the fundamentals of marketing are pretty much the same. And within Diageo, I managed to have a long career, about 17 years, doing all sorts of different types of marketing roles, from running the marketing in the UK, very broad-based portfolio, to working on Smirnoff globally or Baileys globally. So there you get to see a lot of different brands and a lot of different markets and a lot of different consumer needs. So there's a big difference selling high-end whiskey to the Chinese versus Guinness to the Irish. And so those experiences really give you a good grounding in marketing. It's also it's one of the great, I suppose, one of the great marketing universities. It's a place where marketing is at and your consumers are at the heart of the decision making around the organisation, and that's a very good background, I think, to take into any new industry. Plus, they're both large, complex, matrixed organisations, and learning how to navigate those is always useful.
The different industries, of course.
Very different industries.
So obviously media has seen a lot of transition in the past few years, particularly. How has that affected you and your outlook?
Well, obviously the BBC is a media company, and so the changes in media are much more fundamental here than they were at Diageo. Diageo has a big influence on our marketing and the changes in the way we reached our audiences with our marketing materials. It wasn't fundamental to someone's experience of a drink of scotch as to whether it digital. Here, obviously, people are consuming your product digitally. The medium is the product, and so obviously experimentation with short form, with things is integral to your offer getting across and your product being experienced at all, as opposed to just how you're communicating about it. So that's obviously a fundamental difference. The BBC's, we're very lucky. The BBC's been a pioneer in digital since the early 90s. When you arrive at a place and you know that digital and content is vital to the future of marketing, and you've got content from Radio 4 to Doctor Who to Strictly to David Attenborough to Line of Duty at the moment, or the range of content we have on the BBC, and you've got digital presences like BBC iPlayer and bbc.co.uk. We're one of the I think we're the only British based site in the top 5 usage in the UK, and I think we're the only UK based site in the top 100 in the world. So it really is a very successful digital player as well.
And seemingly you would have realised that upon joining. So upon joining, how did your strategies fall into play, and what decisions did you go through about targeting your audience, making sure the right content was there, and also making sure you were future-proofing your position?
Well, the BBC is very different from any other marketing job I've done, because you don't have the luxury of choosing your audience. Your audience is everyone. We're a universal service. You're meant to deliver to everybody in the UK, and across our platforms we have 97% reach of UK audiences through a week. So you serve everyone with a broad mission to inform, educate and entertain. I think when I joined, we rapidly it was George Entwistle, who was then the Brief Director General, and Ralph Rivera, who was then running our future media group. We got together and we agreed that the whole personalisation and the My BBC thing was going to be actually fundamental to our future. And together we, subsequently without George, we started to make the case for that to the organisation. And about a year later, we got the sign off to go ahead with that. So I think personalisation and how we bring the vast range of excellent content from across the BBC to you, so it's not lost somewhere on some linear schedule on one of our services that you don't get to, was one of the key things that we spotted very early that we need to change and we needed to respond to.
Of course, My BBC was a joint partnership,
targeting
content for a specific audience and making sure that everyone had a personal.
Still is. It's still in development, and it's still a journey.
So how is that journey progressing then? What's the next step for it, and how are you learning what works and what doesn't work?
Well, as ever, by experimenting and discovering. So in our marketing materials, we're currently, still early stages. It's one of those things like a skyscraper where you're building underground for a long while before someone sees stuff come up. But it is now. It's starting out. So, for example, I'm a Saracen supporter, so I'm in the stadium for home matches, but for away matches, when it's on, I get alerts on my mobile phones for Saracens, for Liverpool, and for Warwickshire, who are just sort of the sporting teams. So it's firing a lot of our some great stuff going on in sport in terms of personalisation. Because I'm signed in, I now get personalised recommendations on iPlayer based on understanding and the uplifts that we've seen certainly in our marketing materials around, for example, basic email newsletters, where we've even mildly an early state, very broad state, personalised content based on we offer you based on it. We see very, very significant uplifts in people kind of thing. So it's going well. There's a lot more still to be done. We need to relaunch our ID system, and that will take place probably later this year. Work on that. We are already obviously we've already got ways of measuring and looking at what people are doing, and there's a huge amount of stuff there to get your hands on. So people probably interact with the BBC online in terms of individual actions about 800 million times a day. So there's a lot to look at and a lot to learn.
Exactly. Yeah. You mentioned before that it's a very iterative process, trial and error almost. Has the marketer had to change his or her mindset now that technology and the pace of change has proved that you need to continually adapt? And what does that mean for marketing, do you think?
Well, I think to some extent, but I think that fundamentally, what marketing's about, your marketing strategy, you're deciding what your objective is, who you need to talk to, and how you're going to try and shift their attitudes or their behaviour in some way in order to achieve your business, or in our case, the BBC's objectives. That hasn't changed. The medium through which you're doing it has, and the speed of response through digital and speed of learning has. So to that extent, yes, but the core fundamentals don't change.
Yeah, of course.
The channels and the speed of response does change, and not even so much just purely on the marketing side, but on the editorial side. It's quite interesting. There's been significant change in many parts of the business over the last few years in terms of basic things like working shifts. Because if you're working on the sport website, and most people go there on a Saturday afternoon, or most people are signing on some of our things late at night to catch up, or etc. It's no good, having a shift patterns around a 9 to 5 day or a schedule. There's real basics which sound obvious, but yes, there's been huge change and huge response to that kind of.
And just looking past MyBC now, maybe less on the consumer side, but what other sort of digitised strategies have you engaged with on joining the BBC to make sure that everyone is getting the right content and terms?
I think MyBC is the main one. I think the other thing I'd say that which is another major change, but seems kind of less obviously digitally, but absolutely is that recently we brought previously a lot of our marketing materials to be done out of house through third-party agencies, through particularly one Red Bee, and we've now actually changed that, and we've now set up our own agency in-house, and that's very much because we need to work in a cross-platform way, very, very close to our digital colleagues and our production colleagues, and make much more for a much more varied digital media. Because if you like, previously when it was set up 10 years ago, it was basically a system for making 30-second TV trails. Now that's not going to cut it anymore, and so we need much more flexibility, much more close response. So that decision was very much driven about the vision of how we really become a properly digital first marketing department, rather than relying on the traditional agency model. So it's affecting numerous ways. We have a large team who take all the pictures for which appear in the press for BBC programme publicity. Now, previously that would have all been delivered in the normal analogue ways. Now there's a site where journalists from various newspapers can go down and download stuff immediately, and what's more, our pictures people can upload, so on the set of EastEnders doing something for next year's shoot, they can upload from their iPhone on stuff immediately, and that's much more efficient, much cheaper, gives everyone much greater access. So it's affecting huge amounts of ways.
Yeah, and you just said before, which is interesting, that you work closely now with your digital colleagues.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm trying to also get at is, with these new strategies that have to engage in these new tech, have you had to work further with a broader spectrum of your team in terms of technology and the tech?
Oh yes,
people?
definitely. And
And how has that been as a marketer? I mean, is that
well? It's interesting. I've come from the old school of marketing, and I've been learning the digital as it's developed. And there are some who come purely from the digital and tech side. And certainly, particularly on My BBC, every couple of weeks we sit down, us and the tech people, and work through the key issues. And it is about people. Getting people to understand each other's perspectives and talk a common language. I think that it's interesting. For my generation of marketing directors, it's for all previous generations, you were more expert at the core of marketing than the people who are working for you. That's not always the case now. So it's much more about having humility and how you really understand and ask the right questions at a strategic level and get to know sufficient that you can help make a decision. But you're relying often on expertise of significantly more junior people in order to have that conversation. So it requires a different style of leadership, and also a lot of work in getting people from different disciplines to work really closely together. I think in a few years' time we will have marketing people who are completely literate in both and can speak both languages, but both in marketing and, I have to say, on the editorial side there, we see it, and certainly in the older generations we're not there yet. It is all about teamwork and getting those different cultures working together.
Can you see those two silos being brought together then under one more consistent banner?
Well, that's obviously something that you look at, and I think that we will be looking in the future much more. And I think Tony Hall said it in one of our in a speech a while back, that we're looking at how we commission across TV, radio, and online against ideas, and it'll be more looking at that way rather than necessarily. We're currently organised by TV, radio, and online. When we make that shift, who knows? That'll be a major shift if we do. But certainly, we're moving in that direction.
And looking more specifically, really, are there any certain aspects of technology, like cloud technology or source CRM methods, that you've had to engage with too, to just keep the back end ticking over?
Yes, obviously, again, some of the CRM technology we're using, we're upgrading as we've got all some of the My BBC functionality coming in. Again, I've been involved in that, but it's a question of appointing someone with the expertise to really do it, questioning them strategically, understanding how the stack is going to work and what's going to do and all that, but leading it, helping make decisions, checking the performance up to scratch, coaching, rather than being the person right in the weeds and doing it.
So when it comes to selling a strategy to the board, and you've got all of these different people working on different projects with these different decision making, how easy has it become then for a 3-year plan to become aligned, as it were?
It was always complex in big, diverse organisations. Of course it is, but I think we go through a process every 10 years here at the BBC around charter renewal. So where we negotiate with the government, firstly whether we're going to exist for the next 10 years, and secondly, if so, in what form and to do what. And we've been through that process. So what we've been having to do there is actually look more than 3 years ahead, saying, okay, broadly in 10 years' time, where are we going to be? So what do we need to be doing now in order to ensure that we still have a broad-based BBC that can play a similar role in UK society? So, and obviously that is about being an internet-ready BBC. If you say to people, in 5 years' time, will everything be being delivered on the internet? They say no. If you say in 10 years' time, ooh, well, maybe.
Okay.
So this next charter period is going to be the crucial one for how we set. So we've set out a broad vision in our thing, British Bold and Creative, about the kind of BBC we want to see. If that's verified in a white paper by the government coming out soon, then we will then be working our way towards it. But it's very much against a very clear vision of this is where we're going, and then we will experiment our way towards that, and we will find out what's worked. But it's interesting, you know, we did that. There's been a lot of change in the last 10 years. The BBC did a similar process 10 years ago, and pretty much, and there are one or two exceptions, but pretty much all the things it set out to achieve, including things like iPlayer, etc., have been done and are mostly successful. So I think it's been clear about the direction in which you're going, and then flexible in the execution as you learn. Because tech is, you know, 10 years ago when they wrote that, they had no idea there's going to be such a thing as a tablet, for example. That's been absolutely fundamental. Sure. So you clear overall direction, and then adapt and change as you go.
And finally, Philip, just for a bit of insight. The last 10 years, as you rightly said, a lot of change. The next 10 years, if we're led to believe, even more.
Yeah.
What sort of BBC then are you hoping to predict for the next 10 years?
Well, I think a BBC which is playing broadly the same life-enhancing, life-improving role it does for the UK at the moment. So those kind of services, but delivered in an increasingly personal way, and an increasingly digital way, so that you know, we are future-proofed. Like, we'll continue to play that role. We'll still be producing great content, great drama. We'll still be a leading news provider, but the way that we are reaching audiences, I think, will change, and the nature of the services we offer to do that.
Philip, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.